Okay, we're going to draft quarterbacks. And I think this is interesting because Baker last year, and I'll throw out some of these things as we go along, but just so everyone has context, we drafted Baker 11th last year among quarterbacks. And I'll go through the criteria here as to what we were using last year and what we're using this year. So the rule is you're drafting a quarterback, any quarterback who's eligible to play next season for 1 year. The contract doesn't matter. Potential beyond next year doesn't matter. You're drafting for a generic winning team trying to win the Super Bowl in 2022. Let's get to it. Ashley, you are first up in our quarterback draft. Who is your number one overall pick?
Well, I won't keep the suspense going. I'm actually going to pick the same number one pick that Mary Kay had last year when you guys did this. I'm going with Patrick Mahomes. I think the youth, the playoff success, the big arm, what else is there to say? And I think there's a definitive top three for me, but he was my number one.
Yeah, number one last year. It was pretty easy. There was no argument about it. Does anyone have an argument this year? Did anyone have anyone else number one on their big board? No. All right.
I did.
Scott did. Who'd you have?
Tell me why I'm wrong.
Because you're up, Scott. You're pick number two, so you get your number one guy.
Yeah.
So as I started doing last year, I kind of using some analytics models and help with this because I want to spend as little brain power as possible on determining if Taylor Heineke's better than Daniel Jones, stuff like that. So I'm going to go with this cool, partly with this cool list that was put together, kind of joining PFF grades and EPA. Two good ways to measure quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, by the way, after the season was not at the top of that list. He was 10th. Yes, he was 10th. Now, career-wise, he's number one. So I did have him at number two, but I'm going to go with Brady. He was my number one. I think I might have even had him number one last year. If you give me a quarterback and we're only talking about 1 year, I'll take Tom Brady.
So number three is Mary Kay. Who do you have?
Well, I'm thinking that you guys can pretty much guess who I'm going to take here. I would have taken Patrick first. I would have taken Tom second. And there's a pretty good chance that we would all take Aaron Rodgers at number three. That's who I'm taking at number three.
I think there's some personal preference that comes in here. I think you could go probably 5 or 6 different ways here. I'll be curious to see if people really disagree with that. And this might be high, but I'm going to take Joe Burrow. And I think there is a consistency that it is not unfair to expect with him. I think there are guys with more maybe athletic upside. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. I think some guys have that over Burrow, but Burrow has a feel for it that I think we see. I think you saw it in college. I think we saw parts of it last season. I think it's there now. He just has a sense in the pocket. I think he plays well in pressure situations.
Okay, so I've got the 5th pick. I really want to take Justin Herbert here, but I got to take Josh Allen. I can't leave Josh Allen on the board. I know he didn't have the year that he had last year. His completion percentage was lower, but he's still passed for 4,407 yards, 763 rushing. He was 11th in PFF's passing grade. I mean, statistically, this year was a step back for Allen, and this is a little bit prisoner of the moment, but that game he played against the Patriots was unbelievable. I mean, he dominated that game. So Mahomes 1, Brady 2, Rodgers 3, Burrow 4, Josh Allen 5. We are on to round number 2. Ashley, kick us off.
Well, I'm still kind of shocked Dan didn't take Justin Herbert, so I'm going to take Justin Herbert, obviously. Like I said, I mean, I had him at number 5 on my board, just above Josh Allen. Obviously a huge arm. You look at what he did this year, obviously number 3 offensive rating and number 6 passer rating, according to PFF among quarterbacks with that snap minimum in there. And then just like what he did in the Raiders game, even like he hits that 4th and 21 to keep the season alive. He gets the ball into double coverage on that final play of regulation to send the game into overtime. Like just the highs are so high for me. And I am so excited to see what he does next year and obviously throughout his career. But again, I think for me, this is a top 5 guy easily.
All right, Scott, you're up at 7.
All right. I'm taking the guy who I had 4th on my board, Lamar Jackson. I know he had a crappy year in terms of stats, but the reason the Ravens were in the playoff hunt at the end of the season is because of mostly because of what he did. As good as Tyler Huntley looked, they only won one game where he played the majority of the snaps. So Lamar Jackson, I'm willing to overlook this year. He's still one of the most dangerous players in the NFL, a nightmare to game plan against, can overcome 4 interceptions in a single game to get the win. So he's a guy ahead of Herbert, Burrow, and Allen.
Okay, so that takes us to number 8 and Mary Kay.
Okay, well, we are in that range now where you can go up. We've been in that range, but where you can go a lot of different ways. And this, I was torn between 2 players here, and I chose the easier, softer path. And I'm not going to say who the other one is at this point, but the one that I chose did not have a good season this year, did not get his team into the playoffs, and we don't know where he's going to be in 2022. But I still think that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. I still think that he is a gamer. I still really, really like him as a quarterback, and I expect him to rebound in 2022, and that is Russell Wilson.
I'm going to pick a guy who at one point this season was the MVP. And if he hadn't gotten hurt, I think he might have been the MVP. I'll take Kyler Murray. He had a great first half of the year. He hurt his ankle. He didn't play in November. He came back. Cardinals fell apart down the stretch. He didn't play as well. I wasn't watching a ton of Cardinals. I don't know if he was still bothered by the ankle or whatever, but like this guy, again, the way he was playing in the first half of the year, I mean, you'd take this guy with any quarterback in the league. And I still think there's more out there for him. He is a throw first quarterback, only ran for 423 yards, but I think there's a lot in there.
Okay. So I'm really happy this guy's here for me. I think this is great value at number 10. If I'm going to try and win a Super Bowl next year, I know that he's not perfect, but he was on pace before he got hurt last year to approach 6,000 passing yards. Threw for almost 4,500 this year, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 68% completion percentage, 7th in PFF's passing grade. Give me Dak Prescott. So here's our top 10. Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers, Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Jackson, Wilson, Murray, and Prescott. Ashley, pick number 11. Take us away.
I'm between 2 guys here, and I don't know how I feel about this pick, quite honestly, but I'm going to go with Matt Stafford. I mean, he's not perfect. Like you said, I think a lot of these guys have similar faults. He's not perfect. The way he turned it over in the last few weeks of the season, obviously not great, but still top 10 in passer rating, offensive rating. Obviously, LA made that trade to get him for a reason.
I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins here. I think I've said before on the podcast that he's been solid. He's been efficient. And hey, if you want a quarterback to drop into a offensive system similar to what the Browns have, he's a good choice.
Mary Kay, who do you have?
Well, I'm going to make a controversial pick here. I'm going by talent alone. I'm going with the notion that innocent until proven guilty, and we don't know exactly where this is going to go yet. So this is strictly on football talent, and not really strictly on football.
Well, yeah, because I think you have to factor in whether you'd want him under these circumstances.
Right.
So, and if you're trying to win the Super Bowl with him next year,
yeah,
it's the whole package.
Are you going to be without him for 8 games?
It's the whole package. I know. So, and you're right. If we were going strictly on football talent, he for sure would have gone in the top 10. I think we can all agree on that. But I'm going to make the controversial pick here, if for nothing else, for the sake of some intense conversation. So Deshaun Watson at number 13.
And I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence. And it's a matter of, when you're thinking of this group, how much do you believe in like some of these young guys are ready to do it like right now. And Trevor Lawrence was in an awful situation in Jacksonville this year. He looked awful at times. I think once Urban Meyer was fired, he rounded into form a little bit. But I think all of the things that you thought were in place with Trevor Lawrence when he was drafted overall #1 are still there. And now he has a year in the league.
And so for me, I'll just wrap this up by taking Derek Carr. The outside of Joe Burrow, obviously we say this is a Joe Burrow podcast all the time. This is also now a Derek Carr podcast with how much we talk about him. But this is where I'm going to put Derek Carr. When I mentioned all those guys and a lot of those guys that I thought were going to go in this stretch, I actually had Carr kind of on top of that group. So, look, we spent a ton of time talking about him last week. So that's where I'm going to go here at number 15. Okay, so now we're going to keep moving along and we're going to start throwing in some of these names that I was expecting to see in that last round. Ashley, you're up at 16.
I'm going to take Ryan Tannehill here. And I know he didn't have the best year, but I think he still overall has shown like he didn't have very good pass protection this year. He still kind of performed in the right environment. Obviously, Tennessee still gets the #1 seed in the playoffs. So if we're talking about playoff success, if he's in the right system, I think there's a path here. And obviously we're getting murkier with each pick, I think, depending on what you want. So I'm gonna give him the grace and take him at 16.
As we get to Scott at number 17.
Wow. So the guys I have ranked at 13th and 14th are still on the board. And they are very, 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 very similar. Two guys who performed really well when they've both been healthy. Both have had consistency issues. Man, I literally had a slash in between these guys. But I'm going to go with Jimmy Garoppolo.
This is somebody that I think has good upside potential and showed some things this year that I thought were pretty cool. And he's young and I like him. And when I say the next thing, you're going to know exactly who I'm talking about. But I like his touch on the ball. I like the way that he can change it up and put a different speed on the ball for what it requires at times. And I think if he had a little bit more experience and a better situation around him, I think he has the potential to be good. And that is Mac Jones.
Doug, you're up.
So I think I'm not going to take the guy that you're thinking of, Dan, but I am going to take another rookie who I think has a much brighter future than Mac Jones. And I'm going to take Justin Fields, which is based on like nothing he did this year, but the Bears are a mess. He needs a new coach, but I think we saw some glimpses, right? I mean, he's got the package of skills. He's got a Josh Allen kind of package of skills here, I think a little bit. He can throw a deep ball. He's big. He's strong. He can move. I think there's a lot in there for Justin Fields. I think with somebody different calling his plays. And again, we saw the best of Mac Jones against the Browns. We saw the worst of Justin Fields.
At number 20, and I gotta tell you, it kind of hurts me to take this guy because I've never been like a huge fan of his. But he needs to be off the board at this point. He needs to be a guy like I know that if I put this guy in an offense and build it around him a little bit, he can do something for me. I got to take Matt Ryan here. I know he's getting older. He's 36. He'll be 37 when the season starts next year. But I still think Matt Ryan can play. I still think he needs to be off the board by now. So here we go. This is our last round now. Unless, of course, the guy we're waiting for doesn't go. I guess we have to keep going a little bit. But this is our last round. Ashley, you are up at number 21.
I'm going to cause chaos no matter who I pick. But I'm debating. This is largely an upside pick. I'm taking Tyler Huntley here because...
Whoa.
All right.
Okay. Let me talk.
Okay.
What do you want to say, Doug?
No. You're right. Go ahead.
I want to cause chaos. I think in the right scenario with more experience, I am very intrigued by what he can do. I'm very intrigued by the way he can run, the way the Browns talked about him after they played him. I just think there's so much potential there. And I would have taken him later if we were going in another round, but I just kind of want to talk about him, quite honestly.
You got to hope that potential shows up next year.
Yeah, it's a gamble. It's definitely a gamble, but that's why I took him. I would have taken him later if we were going more rounds, but I just kind of want to talk about him.
There's nothing wrong with it. Who doesn't want to talk about Tyler Huntley?
All right, so I'm going to inject it now. This is right. I mean, we have to be talking. This is where Baker Mayfield is sliding in. And the idea that like we're taking backup quarterbacks ahead of Baker Mayfield is a little bonkers to me, that I just want to make sure that people are like, oh my God, they took 37 guys before Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield has a very strong case, even given the year he had to be a top 20 quarterback, because this is a reminder of when you get down to this. Scott, is he your slash? Is Baker your slash?
Yes, he's my slash.
Okay. I thought Baker was your slash. This is where he belongs in this discussion. And I'm not going to wait for us to pick him because we just picked a backup quarterback ahead of Baker Mayfield. So our whole thing,
chaos.
Our whole thing with Baker Mayfield is like, well, he hasn't had like a good full season yet. He had a good, it's like Tyler Huntley played 6 games.
Yes.
So I think like if you want to make a compelling case for you take Baker Mayfield ahead of Kirk Cousins, I think maybe you could. If you want to make a compelling case, you take him ahead of Justin Fields, I certainly think you could. This is exactly, if you want to take him ahead of Matt Ryan, if you want to take him ahead of Mac Jones or Jimmy G, I certainly think the best case scenario of Baker Mayfield, which is certainly not an impossible thing that we see in 2022, has him right in this conversation. And I had him 19th on my list, and we're now at pick 22. And I just didn't want us to go any further without me saying he's number 19 on my list. So we don't have to talk about him all right now, but Ashley picked a backup